Coming up on Omnivore, forecasting flavor trends, the decline of disruptive innovation, and coaching food entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa. It's episode 21 of Omnivore from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT's new Product Development Bootcamp, a comprehensive 10-module online course designed to equip food and beverage professionals with the knowledge and skills necessary to elevate and accelerate product development. Learn more at ift.org/bootcamp.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we explore the intersection of business, science, and technology in the global food system. I'm Bill McDowell. Every year, food technology editors canvass a range of food industry experts and trend watchers to find out what's on the horizon in the coming year. This year's trends include florals, nostalgic mashups, and an abundance of cross-cultural cuisines. But what's driving these trends? Food Technology's Deputy Managing Editor Kelly Hensel chatted with Kerry Group's Global Director of Consumer Research and Insights, Soumya Nair, about the core drivers pushing consumer flavor preferences.
You mentioned in the article this third culture cuisine, and I was so fascinated by it, just the idea of this coming out of the pandemic, consumers looking to be more adventurous, seeking out new taste combinations. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that.
The third culture, cuisine is trying to get a sense of not just comfort, because I always want to try out, adventure still has to come from a place of safety and comfort. I will go back a couple of years. You must have heard fusion food rising, right? Monster mashups, fusion foods, unlikely, unconventional combinations. We ourselves have spoken about it about 5 years ago and even more so. That in today's context, when you're putting in adventure, you're putting in novelty and trying to kind of indulge in something that is just unconventional, not experienced before. That's manifesting today as third culture cuisine. Why is that happening? Is because no longer are people just accepting of fusion food. Even if you start off from food service and what chefs are doing, I think there's this sense of pride of cultures, the sense of deference and respect that's being paid back to those specific cultures and diverse influences of ingredients that can no longer be called fusion. In many senses, fusion is often considered today as a flat derivative, right? So we've talked about how there's a lot more immigration, there's a lot more ethnic influences, people are traveling a lot more. And from there rises this sense of bold curiosity, trying to share not just the culture that I belong to, but also wanting to experience cultures that you probably have lived in. And that's where chefs, for instance, are creating things like, kimchi on a pizza, right? And they're not doing this out of a flat sense of just fusing foods and ingredients, but they're doing it to pay homage to two different cultures and trying to showcase the best of both worlds. I think there is just a lot more sense of belonging to not just the food, but also to the story that goes behind it. And that's what third culture cuisine is.
It's so interesting because it hits upon so many of obviously all of these trends kind of play together, right? And spin off of one another. And another thing that's kind of resonating, it seems, is obviously this health and wellness kind of driver since the pandemic, especially. And we saw that kind of play out in some floral trends flavor trends coming forward in 2024. I think another one was botanicals, obviously have been around for a while and are still playing out. Do you have any thoughts on that trend in particular?
I don't want to talk just about health and wellness. Of course, health and wellness is important, whether it was pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, or post that. Yes, we spent more time had more time during the pandemic to look at our priorities and see what we are doing with life. in this new sense of normal, there's the desire for more empowering food and beverages. Empower my sense of wanting plant-based foods. Empower my understanding of wanting more of a balanced diet. Empower my understanding of food for the body, mind, and soul, right? Like at the heart of it, we always talk about the body, mind, and soul, and that triangle. That's where we live within that health and wellness realm, is looking at empowering needs. People are want to make those decisions for themselves, and they're seeking out food and beverages that can empower that sense. So I don't want to talk about just people want to think about health and wellness. Yes, that's the root, but today they want to be empowered to make that decision. Like botanicals, you mentioned, it's such a big part of health and wellness today, whether it's proactive health or reactive health. It's that sense of like, I may not care for elderberry and elderflower. Maybe I didn't like the idea of the flavor of it. Fine. I'm being empowered by so many other ingredients that will provide me with that solution. So it's, how can I say, a behavioral angle to health and wellness that goes it's not about the outcome as much. It's also about the journey that they take through it.
Nostalgia has been around. Nostalgic flavors, mashups, if you will, have been around for a while. How do you see that evolving? Like, what is that next kind of iteration?
Nostalgia lives in the sense of comfort and safety, yes. But nostalgia squarely sits in the sense of like, I know, I'm familiar with this. There's a sense of craving because you have memories associated with nostalgia. I will say now people are going to continue to have s'mores, right? S'mores yesterday, s'mores today, s'mores tomorrow, Cheetos yesterday, Cheetos today, Cheetos tomorrow, yes?
Yeah.
But now they are willing to make that step further where, it's almost sacrosanct, right? That sense is like nostalgia flavors, like don't touch it, don't mess with my nostalgia flavors.
Right.
That will continue, yes. But people are also a lot more open to be like, I'll introduce one ingredient and see if that works. Like, I love mac and cheese. Do not touch my yellow mac and cheese that's creamy and just like, don't touch it. But now people are a little more curious to say, this is my comfort. Let me see if I can actually put in a hatch chili in there. Or let me see if I could, put in some sriracha in there.
Yeah, nostalgia, and we've talked about adventure, consumers seeking out adventure in terms of flavor trends. Those are two drivers for the flavor trends we identified for 2024. But I know Kerry has also identified some other drivers. I think there are 7 root drivers in total that you guys have identified for consumer behavior. And I was hoping you could take us through those really quickly so that we can think about them in terms of the flavor trends and other trends, other food and beverage trends moving forward in the new year.
These drivers are what influences people's food choices. So you have 1, which is adventure novelty that we spoke about. 2, which is indulgence and premium. That gives rise to kind of the brave new world of flavors and still trying to experience things that are, purely indulgent. You have comfort and nostalgia that has that sense of safety and security, familiarity. There is health and wellness. Then you have authenticity, originality. So that sense of authentic adjacent. So that third culture cuisine is authentic adjacent, right? Like adjacent to authenticity because it has 2 different worlds blending, or maybe 3 sometimes. And the final piece is sustainability.
Yeah.
All of these will continue to be key motivators for consumers. It's how it manifests into trends and tastes that are influencing them that will change every year. Okay. But at the heart of it, we are always tracking what the root motivators are to consumers.
Soumya Nair is Global Director of Consumer Research and Insights for Kerry Group, a leading flavor and nutrition ingredients manufacturer. Learn about the flavors that will drive product development in 2024 and beyond in the October issue of Food Technology. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment, but first, this word from our sponsor.
Introducing IFT's Product Development Bootcamp, a comprehensive 10-module online course designed to equip food and beverage professionals with the knowledge and skills necessary to elevate and accelerate product development. Whether you're new to product development or need a refresh on the basics, IFT's Product Development Bootcamp offers a wealth of valuable insights, practical strategies, and real-world examples to take your product development to the next level. Learn more at ift.org/bootcamp.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. Disruption. Has there been a bigger buzzword in the food community for the past decade? Well, Rabobank senior consumer foods analyst Tom Bailey says the age of disruption is over, at least for now. What's more, he says some of the recent food and beverage disruptions haven't really been all that industry watchers and investors had been hoping for. Bailey shares his take on what innovation will look like in the years ahead in this conversation with Food Technology's Mary Ellen Kuhn.
Well, welcome to the Omnivore podcast, Tom. In a recent report you wrote, you asked the question, is the age of food disruption over? And I'd say that based on your report, your answer is yes, at least for now. Is that an accurate take on your perspective? And could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So based on the insights and patterns that we looked at, it seems that there was clearly a frenzied era of disruption in food, and it's taking a breather, is safe to say. The past decade, we saw a surge of these disruptive innovations. All you have to do is go to Expo West and you'll see a lot of cool, exciting new disruptive products. Recently, we've definitely seen a recalibration towards incremental innovation. And it stems from changes to all of these tailwinds we saw driving disruptive innovation, from a shift in the supply chain, just securing products for packaging or ingredients for flavors. That has all changed, and it still remains a challenge for a lot of companies. So that's a very basic aspect that has shifted. But we've also seen a change in the consumer behavior. So consumers are a little more choosy about what they want to buy, and they're penny pinching a bit more given the financial environment. So we've seen a change in that, and also I think that we've learned, and we'll probably talk more about it, their appetite for some of these products. But the financial markets also, and I think that this is an important one, the financial markets have shifted. So a higher interest rate is going to change the way that a lot of these startups are valued from a investment standpoint. And that changes the appetite also. But I think it's important, and I'll just leave it at this, to underline that while the intensity has dampened a little bit, disruptive innovation is by no means extinct. It's just taking a backseat for the time being.
Well, that's a good point. And maybe we could talk a little bit more about what that means, because I did have a question about innovation as things change. What are you forecasting for innovation in the food and beverage industry?
So I think we're already seeing it by and large. The innovation is shifting to very pragmatic, consumer-led products being developed. So basic incremental innovations. So we're talking flavor changes or slight format changes or packaging changes and things of that nature. So, Cheez-Its have a puffed Cheez-It, which would be an incremental, innovation that's much more simple for the consumer to grasp from a new product standpoint. But we've also seen, some of the big names specifically calling out a purposeful shift towards incremental innovation. And that would be, McDonald's has said that they're going to focus on their core menu and their core successful products. And that's going to be focusing on quality of the burgers. So juicier, more flavorful, traditional Big Macs. They're going to also do a chicken Big Mac. But we also seen Chobani shift and call out specifically, they're going to be looking at incremental innovations after massive, prolific category expansion, bring it back to the core products that they do well and look at how they can build upon those that align with the consumer.
Well, I wanted to ask you if the age of disruption has ended or tailed off a bit for now. Is there a defining word for the food and beverage market for the next decade?
Yeah, that's a good question. should have probably used this word in the report, but I think the defining word would be refinement. So the next decade, we're going to see, the brands refining their offerings, which I've kind of just talked about a little bit, focusing on improving those flavors, textures, and those points. Also, personalization of products and flavors, I think, is going to be interesting for consumer brands, for restaurants and foods, quick service restaurants specifically. I think that personalization means a lot to today's consumer, particularly millennials and Gen Z. They love that personalized story.
Well, I just asked you to look forward. So if I could take you back and just ask you about the past decade, what disruptive product or product category would you say has been the most overrated?
Yeah, that's an easy one. I feel bad picking on them so much, but I think that the alternative meats really, I personally, I wanted to see them succeed. I wanted to love it. I wanted it to take off, but it just, frankly, up front, it didn't taste great. But to give it some credit, they did shift and create a novel way of thinking about protein sources and sustainability specifically. But I think that it really created a significant amount of hype and overinvestment that just outpaced the adoption rates from consumers themselves. Contrast that with alternative milks, which I think that the alternative meats assume they would have a similar sort of adoption rate with the consumers, where alternative milks are up to 20% of the total milk category now, was a quiet winner. They are loud now. You have the Oatly ads coming out and being quite antagonistic towards the dairy industry now. But they've already got a strong foothold in the traditional milk category. So they've kind of got room to make those claims. They can back them up by their presence in the category. Alternative meats, just they don't have that yet. They didn't catch on. And they came in screaming, and it was almost an oversell, underdeliver story versus milks, which were undersell.
Yeah, I guess that whole idea of overpromise and underdeliver is never a good thing.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Well, you mentioned the alternative milk products. Are there any other products that have kind of emerged in the past decade or so that you find impressive?
Yeah, so there's a lot kind of on the fringe of would be disruptive. Some of the products that I do like were some of the fermented foods, especially products like kombucha, kefir. These are twist. They are somewhat disruptive to traditional beverage category and traditional drinkable yogurt category, but they bring together that unique blend of taste, the health side of things, and traditional food practices. On the lines of truly disruptive to food, I'd say precision fermentation specifically it hasn't done very well, to date. They've raised a lot of money. They haven't had any big wins with a specific branded product or integration as an ingredient into big food brands specifically. But I do think that they're going to have a place in the supply chain. And I do think that products like infant formula, for example, there's a big need for some of these very specific ingredients that aren't found in nature outside of the human, that we've been trying to replicate through manufacturing processes that precision fermentation can nail. And it belongs in there. And I think that we're going to see precision fermentation come out and actually do very well.
Interesting. So I wanted to go back to something you touched on as we started, in the whole access to venture capital. I think everyone agrees that there's going to be less of it. So what kind of investment opportunities will venture capitalists be seeking out in this time period?
That's a very good question. And we talk about it a lot. I work in a bank at the end of the day. And there's a lot of discussion around where's the money going to go, and how are companies going to be valuing specifically venture capital, which I think has been driving a lot of the investment. They're still going to be looking at disruptive innovation. They're going to be the stopgap. So let me step back. I think the large corporates got very excited by disruptive innovations, and they developed incubators, and they were investing a lot towards disruptive products. I think that those incubators and those investments and that focus is going to be more geared around incremental. I think they're going to leave the disruptive, the higher risk stuff to the venture capital firms, private equity groups, and some of those kind of outsourcing the disruptive investments. So the VC firms, venture capital firms, are going to be the stopgap for that disruptive innovation. So they're going to continue to incubate that, but I think they're going to be doing less of it because they can't take the risks they could over the last decade or so because the cost of money has just gone up. So you have to be very, very careful. You need to be looking, for investments that have very clear value proposition, a solid business model, demonstrated market traction already, not just a pie in the sky theory, something that's actually that's going to be, demonstrating traction with the consumer in terms of the financial metrics that I think that they'll be looking for.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. These are great insights, and we're very appreciative of them.
Tom Bailey is a senior consumer foods analyst with Rabobank. Learn more about what he's forecasting for the food industry in the October issue of Food Technology. After a successful run in product development and sales roles at food giants like Unilever, Nabisco, Nestle, and Givaudan, Donna Rosa found herself at a career crossroads in the late 90s. Some volunteer work and international development evolved into a 20-year career focus that has taken her from Africa to Central America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. In 2019, Rosa launched E4 Enterprises, which offers online business coaching and education services for entrepreneurs and emerging economies. I recently caught up with her to discuss her work, the challenges and opportunities facing her clients, and what she's learned along the way. Donna, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. I'm so happy to be here talking to you.
In the food technology interview, you discussed the difference between relief and development work. Can you elaborate a bit on the potential you see for food science to contribute to both the immediate relief efforts and long-term development goals?
That's such a good question. So what I explained in the interview was that relief is sort of synonymous with humanitarian aid and tends to be more acute, tends to be short-term. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but when there's immediate crisis. And then development is just that, developing countries, developing economies. It's longer term. It's, more things in place. But in terms of food science, there's a place for food science and processing in both areas. In the acute relief aid, the potential is with food that is therapeutic food. So it's called RUTF, ready to use therapeutic food. And this is things like fortified nut pastes and milk and powders and things like this. That all takes food science. But actually the larger market, if you will, is in the development. So when you think about how many, crisis situations in the world and how many countries that need to be developed, that's where I think most of our potential is. And this is enabling food processing in all the little companies and all the countries around the world that need help with food science, because they don't have this.
How much do you think that perceptions around food processing itself need to be changed among these international aid organizations and even in the local communities that need it? What are the myths that are out there that need to be busted?
Yeah, the word processing is kind of a loaded word. And I'm going to echo something that came up in a IFT roundtable that I did a couple of months ago. And what I advocate for is basic processing as a time saver, as efficiency. Now, the formulation's another question. And I find that the local communities don't really have a problem with processing. They do have a problem with putting unfamiliar ingredients into their food. They just don't like it. And they like their food to be familiar. It's not easy to bring a new food in here, that they don't know. They don't like that. And so, if guar gum is native to what it is, then go ahead and use it. But if it's not something they know, then formulate it with ingredients that they're familiar with. So I think it's more of a explaining this better.
In the magazine interview, there's one phrase that you use that really struck me. You referred to the lean season. So can you talk a little bit more about seasonality and its impact on food security and how food science, to the point of what you're talking about regarding processing, how can it contribute to scalable solutions that alleviate that challenge?
First of all, the lean season or the hungry season depends on, what the country is and what they call it. But this is what happens when you're relying on fresh food. Anybody, it's going to go bad, or they don't know how to store things. They don't have cold storage. They can't seal things properly. They don't have the packaging available. They don't know how to extend the shelf life. And so if we can put that into a form where, or even just packaging, properly. So there's lots of things that we can do so that the food will last longer until the next harvest. Now, in terms of scaling, it's almost like we have to scale down before we scale up. But what I mean is that, all of us that are in food science and food technology, we're all familiar with the large scale dryers and food engineering and equipment and things like this. But the first challenge in developing countries is scaling down to a very small food processor who doesn't have a lot of money and has a very small operation. Then you can scale up. Once you have a small, let's say, solar dryers, as an example, that are efficient, that are clean, that do a good job, then you can scale that elsewhere. And then you take that to another community and another one, and then another one. And then as the business grows, then they can scale. So it's entirely possible to scale, but you have to think small first.
International aid and development are almost by definition outside-in efforts. So how do you ensure that the food development initiatives that you're working on are culturally sensitive and appropriate to the local communities that they're intended to serve?
That's just a matter of awareness and getting to know your quote unquote customers or clients before you inflict solutions on them. And so you just have to be culturally aware. You have to learn what people eat and what they like, what they don't like, how they eat. You have to take the time to do that before you can develop a solution. And I've been on projects where the solution was developed on the outside in a lab, but it was brought to the people first and said, is this something that you would like? It's market research. And they'll say, I don't know what this is, or this is like something, we have something similar in our culture. And then you formulate it with local ingredients. So you have to just take the time. There's no other way around it to get to know that local cuisine.
So looking ahead, what are the most exciting opportunities or innovations that you foresee can have the biggest impact on food security?
To me, the most exciting thing is just getting the word out and creating the awareness of what food science can do. That's the first step. That's where we start. How do we make people aware, and how do we make it so that another important point is that food scientists and all scientists tend to like to take the technology out to where could it go, and we need to restrain ourselves and keep it very simple and very low tech. In food science, in product development, we have a lot of control over the product and the rheology and the texture and the sensory qualities. And I think we have to, take a step back and say, let's work with what we have.
Based on your experience, what do you think are the biggest areas of need or biggest areas of opportunity? Is it food safety? Is it supply chain? Is it food waste? Where are the areas where you think systemically we can make the most impact?
I would say a couple of areas. Improve nutrition, formulating for nutrition. Food safety is really, really important. I would say those two things. And the third would be value addition. So help
these economies add value to their products, because right now a lot of them are commodity based, and a commodity based system doesn't make a lot. You'll never make a lot of money at that. You have to learn how to add value. And I think that's an important contribution for food science. And, that entails a lot of things. It entails food engineering and development and all kinds of, I would say almost all the food science disciplines could be applied.
I know one of the big priorities for you is creating more space for young professionals, for students to get involved in this. What's missing, and what do we need to be doing as a community to encourage more engagement around this topic?
Young people now, they don't just want a paycheck. They want their work to mean something. And a lot would jump at this. And so the first thing that we need to do is create that awareness so that food science gets to be a component of projects. And once the jobs are created, once the need is created, I think that we're going to have plenty of people to fill those positions. The other thing that's needed is creativity, and the person has to be creative. And I think there's a self-selection involved in this area. And we need curricula too. Once we have the job demand, then we need specialized curricula to teach these young food scientists how you do it in a low resource, poor environment. You're not going to be able to use an HPLC. How do you measure the moisture? How do you prevent aflatoxins when you have very little to work with? That's where the creativity comes in, and that's specialized training.
Donna Rosa is founder and chief entrepreneurship officer of E4 Enterprises, which offers consulting and educational support for entrepreneurs in developing nations. She is also the 2023 recipient of IFT's Humanitarian Award for Service to the Science of Food in honor of Elizabeth Fleming Steer.
This episode of Omnivore has been sponsored by IFT's new Product Development Bootcamp, a comprehensive 10-module online course designed to equip food and beverage professionals with the knowledge and skills necessary to elevate and accelerate product development. Learn more at ift.org/bootcamp.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology Magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the News and Publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode. This is Omnivore.